Ms. Owens.
That was unfair.
It was not unfair. You had plenty of extra time. Ms.
No, I
Owens.
did not.
Ms. Owens.
Mr. Chairman, there we go. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Mr. Collins, thank you for having me here today. I received word on my way in that many of the journalists were confused as to why I was invited, and none of them knew that I myself was the victim of a hate crime when I was in high school. That's something that very few people know about me because the media and the journalists and the left are not interested in telling the truth about me because I don't fit the stereotype of what they like to see in black people. I'm a Democrat, I support the President of the United States, and I advocate for things that are actually affecting the black community. I'm honored to be here today in front of you all because the person sitting behind me is my 75-year-old grandfather. I've always considered myself to be my grandfather's child, and I mean to say that my sense of humor, my passion, and my work ethic all comes from the man that is sitting behind me. My grandfather grew up on a sharecropping farm in the segregated South. He grew up in an America where words like racism and white nationalism held real meaning under the Democrat Party's Jim Crow laws. My grandfather's first job was given to him at the age of 5 years old, and his job was to lay tobacco out to dry in an attic in the South. My grandfather has picked cotton, and he has also had experiences with a Democrat terrorist organization of that time, the Ku Klux Klan. They would regularly visit his home and they would shoot bullets into it. They had an issue with his father, my great-grandfather. During my formative years, I had the privilege of growing up in my grandfather's home. It's going to shock the committee, but not once, not in a single breath of a conversation did my grandfather tell me that I could not do something because of my skin color. Not once did my grandfather hold a gripe against the white man. I was simply never taught to view myself as a victim because of my heritage. I learned about faith in God, family, and hard work. Those were the only lessons of my childhood. There isn't a single adult today that in good conscience would make the argument that America is a more racist or a more white nationalist society than it was when my grandfather was growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want to say is that brown people need to be scared, which seems to be the narrative that we hear every 4 years right ahead of a presidential election. Here are some things we never hear. 75% of the black boys in California don't meet state reading standards. In inner cities like Baltimore, within 5 high schools and 1 middle school, not a single student was found to be proficient in math or reading in 2016. The single motherhood rate in the black community, which was at 23% in the 1960s when my grandfather was coming up, is at a staggering 74% today. I am guessing there will be no committee hearings about that. There are more black babies aborted than born alive in cities like New York, and you have Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo lighting up buildings to celebrate late-term abortions. I could go on and on. My point is that white nationalism did not do any of those things that I just brought up. Democrat policies did. Let me be clear. The hearing today is not about white nationalism or hate crimes. It's about fear-mongering, power, and control. It's a preview of a Democrat 2020 election strategy, same as the Democrat 2016 election strategy. They blame Facebook, they blame Google, they blame Twitter. Really, they blame the birth of social media, which has disrupted their monopoly on minds. They called this hearing because they believe that if it wasn't for social media, voices like mine would never exist, that my movement Blexit, which is inspiring black Americans to leave the Democrat Party, would have never come about, and they certainly believe that Donald Trump would not be in office today. Looking on the next thing to focus on now that the Russian collusion hoax has fallen apart. What they won't tell you about the statistics and the rise of white nationalism is that they've simply changed the data set points by widening the definition of hate crimes and upping the number of reporting agencies that are able to report on them. What I mean to say is that they're manipulating statistics. The goal here is to scare blacks, Hispanics, gays, and Muslims into helping them censor dissenting opinions, ultimately into helping them regain control of our country's narrative, which they feel that they lost. They feel that President Donald Trump should not have beat Hillary. If they actually were concerned about white nationalism, they would be holding hearings on Antifa, a far-left, violent, white gang who determined one day in Philadelphia in August that I, a black woman, was not fit to sit in a restaurant. They chased me out. They yelled race traitor to a group of black and Hispanic police officers who formed a line to protect me from their ongoing assaults. They threw water at me. They threw eggs at me. And the leftist media remained silent on it. If they were serious about the rise of hate crimes, They may perhaps be examining themselves and the hate that they have drummed up in this country. Bottom line is that white supremacy, racism, white nationalism, words that once held real meaning, have now become nothing more than election strategies. Every 4 years, the Black community is offered handouts and fear. Handouts and fear. Reparations and white nationalism. This is the Democrat preview. Of course, society is not perfectible. We've heard testimony of that today. There are pockets of evil that exist, and those things are horrible, and they should be condemned. But I believe the legacy and the ancestry of Black Americans is being insulted every single day. I will not pretend to be a victim in this country, and I know that that makes many people on the left uncomfortable. I want to talk about real issues in Black America. I want to talk about real issues in this country and real concerns. The biggest scandal, this is my last sentence, in American politics is that Democrats have been conning minorities into the belief that we are perpetual victims, all but ensuring our failure. Racial division and class warfare are central to the Democrat Party platform. They need blacks to hate whites, the rich to hate the poor, and soon enough it'll be the tall hating the short.
The time of the
I do want to go back to Ms. Owens for a second. You made a statement at the very beginning on why you were here, and I think the victim of, if you've heard your story, and you've told that story many times, but if you would share how that's affected your view as you go forward and the issues that you're wanting to address today.
Certainly. So when I was speaking about different classifications of hate crimes, which actually has increased and obviously impacts statistics, when I was in high school, I received a slew of messages from the Democrat governor of Connecticut's son, Mr. Daniel Malloy, and at the time he was the mayor of Stamford, and his son, along with 3 other boys, referred to me as the N-word, threatened to tar and feather my family and put a bullet in the back of my head like they did to Martin Luther King. This is a story that's not often spoken about because the media has no interest in telling the truth about how it's formed my views towards conservatism. The media turned it into a firestorm, and it became a political tool for people to gain power. The NAACP used me at that time, would just meet me outside of the school with cameras in tow to speak out against the crimes. Of course, now I'm older and I realize that that's really just a fundraising mechanism, and that a lot of these groups survive because they cannot have the problem fixed, ever. The NAACP never wants racism to go away. Bottom line, all I was looking for at that time was an apology. The youngest person in that car was 14 years old, and I understand that human beings can make mistakes and do stupid things, but we're not in a society anymore where an apology is good enough, and we're obsessed with labels. We're obsessed with labeling people as racist, as they did to those young boys, and it simultaneously impacted me as a victim. It's not fun to be a victim, and I'm adamantly against victimhood, and I speak out to the Black community about how it ultimately harms us.
And I appreciate Anthony for sharing that, and I think as we go forward, as I started my testimony with, is all of us here need to be heard. This is exactly what we're advocating. The more we hear, the more we can then at least relate to those who we may disagree or agree with, and I thank you for being a part, and it's the rest.
from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by stating clearly and unequivocally that I reject white supremacy and all forms of hate. I'm quite sure that my colleagues on this side of the dais share that point of view. In fact, I'm quite confident that my colleagues on the other side of the dais do as well. Ms. Owens, let me begin with you if I can. I think it's fair to say that you didn't start off on the conservative side of the ledger, is that correct?
That's correct, I was a liberal.
Okay. And so just on a couple of issues, and you mentioned them in your statement, but just to go back to them, if you could tell us again kind of what they are and what hatred that you've experienced as a result of having this point of view. You mentioned the term Blexit. Would you describe what that is and what hate that you've experienced as a result of your position on that?
I launched a movement called Blexit, which is the Black exit from the Democrat Party. When I became educated about the issues and stopped reacting emotionally, which is what the left wants us to do, presumably, when they hold up pictures of burning churches, I began to examine the facts and look at some of the narratives they were spinning. For example, in 2016, it was police brutality, and I realized that they are dissuading us against our own best interests. And I wanted to have a more productive dialogue with the Black community about the issues that are actually affecting us and impacting us. When I announced that I was a conservative, I've never seen anything more racist, more disgusting, more vitriolic, and more hate that's come my way in my entire life, and the things that Democrats and the media say about me today. I've been referred to as an Uncle Tom, a bed wench. For those of you that don't know, that means a slave that sleeps with the master, a house nigger, And these are all words that have been said over and over again about black conservatives when they have the audacity to think for themselves and become educated about our history and the myth of things like the Southern switch and the Southern strategy, which never happened.
You mentioned, I think, on, well, let me ask you this. I think you did, on the life issue, you're pro-life, is that accurate? And,
That's correct, and I started off pro-choice.
and what sort of hatred, if any, have you experienced, or do you get?
Well, that hate tends to come majority from Caucasian Democrats. When I start telling the truth about the fact that the community that is the most impacted by abortion is the black community. 800 to 900 black babies are aborted every single day. That amounts to about 18 million black babies aborted since 1973. And the black population has stagnated. Our population growth has stagnated completely. These are the kinds of logical discussions that I've had that have earned me all the titles that we discussed before.
I've got a whole bunch more questions, but thank you for your time. I'd like.
Ms. Owens, I'm going to direct these questions to you, if I may. I don't know that you've seen this, but it's a memorandum that the majority Democrats prepare for the committee members. And in this memorandum, they go through the various witness names and organizations that they represent, the Anti-Defamation League, Equal Justice Society, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and then we get to you. Oh my goodness. Candace Owens, Director of Communications at the Conservative. Nobody else is described as progressive or liberal, but you are described as a conservative advocacy group, Turning Point USA, and a conservative commentator and political activist known for her criticism of Black Lives Matter and the Democrat Party. I think you've caused my friends on the left to go to their safe spaces, and I'd love to explore with you a little bit of the reason for that. Do you consider yourself a conservative?
I am a conservative, yes.
Okay. Are you pro-life?
I am pro-life.
Okay. Does that trigger people when you see them, that they know that you're pro-life?
It makes them very upset, and Democrats hate me.
Do you own a gun?
Pardon?
Do you own a gun?
No, sir.
When next time you come to Colorado, we'll take you shooting. Are you a Christian?
Yes, I am.
Are you proud of your family?
I'm very proud of my family.
Okay. Let me ask you something. Do you hate Americans with black skin color?
Absolutely not. I actually love Americans with black skin color so much that I'm willing to fall on the sword 1,000 times for them to wake up and realize that we are being lied to, abused, and used by the Democrat Party.
How about Americans with white skin color? Do you hate them?
I do not, and that's a problem for people on the left.
Do you hate Hispanics?
I do not.
Do you hate Asians?
I do not.
Do you hate lesbians or gays or anybody from the LGBTQ community?
Nope, I've got all of that in my family.
I'm baffled because in the chairman's opening statement, he said that you openly associate with purveyors of hate.
Yes, purveyors of hate, by his definition, is anybody that supports the president. I support the president because he's done a tremendous job in helping the black community, despite all of the rhetoric from the media and leftists, which do not want him to be successful.
Tell me a little bit about how the president has helped the black community, if you would, please.
Well, he's lowered the black unemployment rate. It's the lowest it's ever been in the history. He's getting us off of our feet. We see, I believe the last number I checked was 3.5 million people are off of food stamps, something that the Black Caucus sat down and didn't applaud. Neither did any of the Democrats applaud, because they want a system where blacks are dependent on the government. They are the people that put in place the policies that broke down the black family, and the biggest problem that's facing our community is father absence. In every room that I've been in with the president, he talks about real issues, and he doesn't pander to us. He doesn't do Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Southern drawl accent and speaking to us like we're slaves. He asks us important questions, and the most important question he could have asked was, Black America, what do you have to lose? Because we were already losing under Democrat leadership.
Do you believe that you openly associate with purveyors of hate?
I absolutely do not. I have no tolerance for hate whatsoever.
Do you believe that college campuses should be open discussions, or there should be open discussions on college campuses for various issues?
I absolutely do. You know, I do a campus tour tonight. I'm flying up to University of Connecticut to continue that, and we are being met with aggressive leftist groups. 3 Antifa chapters have declared they're going to try to shut it down, and we face this violence every day on the left, and nobody ever wants to talk about it.
And I guess what I was going to ask you, you went on to explain it before I got a chance to, but have you ever been disinvited from speech opportunities at college campuses because of your conservative views?
All the time.
Is that a form of hatred, do you think?
Of course it is, and we're not talking enough about political hatred in this country. We're not talking enough about conservative activists being attacked, like myself. We had a student whose dorm was set on fire for being a member of the Turning Point chapter, and all we preach is for free markets and capitalism as a means to lift the most people out of poverty. That is my belief, and of course, my main thesis is that black people do not have to be Democrats, and we are not owned by the left, and I understand that causes some people trouble.
So, as a conservative, you've attended many conservative events and visited with many conservatives. And I am not denying for a moment